When faced with an unexpected pregnancy, the pro-life movement encourages women and families to seek life-affirming resources that don't include abortion. Some life-affirming resources for parents that are unable to raise their child include safe havens, which we've been talking about, foster care, and adoption. While reforms are needed to better the foster care and adoption system, these programs are still giving and helping families who want to have children become parents, and most importantly, giving children the chance to experience an amazing life. My guest today is Dr. Jacqueline Brown. She is a clinical psychologist turned, get this, Christian fiction writer. You don't see that every day. As a psychologist, she specialized in working with women and girls who experience trauma and entanglement with the criminal and juvenile justice systems. In 2017, she decided to take a break from that career and focus on writing. She's now published 8 novels and a children's picture book. She is best known for the Light series and the Awakening series. More importantly, she is a wife and a mother of 3 beautiful children. She is blessed to have been gifted her children through adoption and loves speaking about the beauty of adoption. Thanks for joining me today on Explicitly Pro-Life. I'm Kristan Hawkins. All right, Jacqueline, I'm so excited to have you here with me virtually today in the studio with Explicitly Pro-Life, because you and I recently had a conversation in Florida over breakfast. Thank you very much for my breakfast. And I just when we were talking about the adoption care system, the foster care system, and your personal experiences as a psychologist, then as an adoptive mother, I kept thinking to myself, I wish everyone in America could hear this conversation. So thanks for joining me.
I am excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
You know, this is a topic that, comes up a lot. There's not a college campus that I go to. I was at a college campus just yesterday. There was a lovely welcome protest planned of me. It was amazing. I'm so popular. There was a condom piñata in my honor. It was lovely. But every time I have conversations with pro-choice young people on campus, the trauma and the pain that children have experienced through our American foster care system always comes up. Yes. And it always comes up as like this justification of, well, if they're going to be stuck in the foster care system, we should just abort them. And it's more humane to kill the child, which, obviously you and I as pro-life advocates know is wrong. But they have a point. There's a major problem in our foster care and our adoption systems in America. And I would love for you to kind of break some of that down for us. And just, I guess, first start by telling us how you got involved as a psychologist working with young women who were in the foster care system, and maybe kind of giving some and sharing some of your insights.
So before I start there, I want to just say the foster care system and the adoption system really are different. You can adopt through foster care, but foster care is designed to keep families sort of intact, biological families intact. And that sounds great in theory, but there's some problems with that. And then the adoption system is different. So that's back to how I got started. I actually started, my master's was in eco-psychology, so environmental psychology. And then I went and specialized in pediatric psychology, which is more medical, children that are experiencing like a chronic illness. But so that was really what my doctorate was in. Then I graduated and started clinical work. And even before I did that, I started working, in training. Often you're in a Medicaid clinic. And so that's where I was. And so the foster care system was very prevalent in those clinics. And then after I graduated, I realized that's really where my heart was with specifically girls and young women that have experienced trauma. It was something that in graduate school I was kind of afraid of, but then professionally found that was sort of my niche. So I did that, loved those girls so much. And then just felt sort of this very strange calling to go write books. So that's how I started in that career, left that career. And since then, I do a lot of volunteer work for a nonprofit that continues to work with kids in the foster care system, or in the, it's a beautiful ranch where we have wonderful children. And it's basically for kids that can't live with their families for whatever reason. Many of those kids are children who are within the state foster care system, but then others are privately placed there by their families. And it's all donation fed. So it doesn't matter financially what the family has. We take all the kids. So it's a great ranch.
That's awesome. And I loved hearing all that you've done in the, not only the clinical expertise that you have, but then also just the personal expertise and the story that you have, being an adoptive mother, volunteering at the ranch. I guess, we hear a lot about the problems with the foster care system. Can you explain to us, and I thank you for, by the way, backing up and doing that definition, because I think you're right. A lot of people don't understand that the goal of foster care isn't to adopt out children to other families. It's to reunify the families. But when we hear pro-choice people talking about the problems with the foster care system, what are they talking about specifically?
There is so much trauma that happens in the foster care system, and I feel like we could talk for days and days and days. It is a system that at its core, I think, is good. At its core, it wants to keep families intact. And I think we all would say that is beautiful. That is wonderful. That is exactly what we should all be doing. Unfortunately, what comes out of that, though, is a lot of trauma for the kids, because you have parents who cannot parent for whatever reason. And so often substance abuse is a huge issue. Abuse, their own trauma, their own wounds, which then they unfortunately transfer. We all, as parents, transfer our wounds to our kids, hopefully less each generation, but it happens. And so if we haven't worked on that as parents, those wounds just get worse and worse. And so what happens within the foster care system is a family is not able to care for their child, and the state decides that, right? So that's not you and I deciding that. That's the state coming in and deciding, okay, there's something pretty egregious going on, because for the state to remove a child, it's pretty serious. It's not a minor thing. So the state would remove the child. They'd put them in a foster care setting, and typically that's going to be another family. So that would be a family setting. The problem is that that's not that child's family, right? So if you have a child in your home that's acting out in a lot of awful ways because they've been traumatized, but that's not your child, why would you put up with that? And so they don't. They say, you know what? This kid is not acting the way I want a child to act in my home. Find them a different home. So then suddenly they're in a different home, and a different home, and a different home. And each one of those is a loss and a trauma. And then you've got this system that does not prioritize getting that child into a permanent home quickly. It's really about how many opportunities can we give. Typically it's a biological, I suppose it could be an adoptive family, but it's that family of origin, wherever that child is originating from. So typically biological family. How can we give them the opportunity to get their child back? And again, that's a beautiful thing. Unfortunately, what sometimes happens is those families sort of push the envelope a little bit. And so they realize, well, I don't really need to do anything for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So they do something on that very last day. And then the judge is like, oh, well, you're trying. And then it just continues to perpetuate. And we've seen court dates get pushed out 6 months. Well, 6 months in a 10-year-old's life and a 12-year-old's life, it's a very significant chunk of time. And so there's no rush. And so I think that the kids that you're seeing on the college campuses are right. There's the amount of trauma. Like the children that go into foster care typically have been traumatized, but then that system further traumatizes them. So what I would love to see happen, if I had like a magic wand, is for the system to prioritize getting those kids into a permanent loving home, their forever home, as quickly as possible. That very well might be their biological family, which is great, and give them the supports that they need. But I think pretty early in that process, the social worker, the others, in the state of Florida, it's DCF, Department of Children and Families, or in other states, Child Protective Services, those workers are going to be able to identify fairly quickly, this family is going to actually fight to get this kid back and do what we've asked them to do, or they're not. And so if the answer is they're not, then let's really try to get them into a permanent loving home, their forever home, quickly, to reduce that trauma. Now, the flip side of that is adoption. And so you can typically, when you hear about adoption, you think about adoption, at least for me, I think about like a newborn baby adoption, domestic. When you think domestic adoption, for me at least, I think newborn baby. That is an entirely different system. And that, frankly, is something I think that we should be talking to girls about or women who are in an unplanned pregnancy, who are mercifully choosing life, thank God, but then are also saying to themselves, but I can't parent. And that's okay. There are wonderful homes. There are wonderful families that you get to pick. I think that system is really the antithesis to the foster care system, because the foster care system really strips away control from families, from kids, and gives it to the state. The adoption system gives all that control to that birth mother. She gets to pick every single thing. She gets to pick everything about the couple that she chooses for her child. She gets to pick really how much contact she has with her child. I mean, it's the opposite. And the other thing I want people to know is that if you are in the foster care system, if your children have been taken away by the state, at any point you can say, no, I'm taking back control and I'm choosing. You could work the plan, but you could also say, I'm choosing an adoptive family. We're going to go through adoption. We're not going to go through foster care anymore. I recognize I cannot parent this child or these children, and we're going to go into a private adoption situation. And you take back control and you remove that control from the state.
You know, one thing that I thought was illuminating when you and I met a few weeks ago in Florida for breakfast, once again, thank you again, you had said to me that the average child, because often, this is why you were so right in backing up the conversation of explaining the intent of foster care, because when I'm talking with students on campuses, the myth is that there's like hundreds of thousands of children in foster care waiting to be adopted, which isn't really true. There's about, I think, 400,000 some children in the United States in foster care. About 100,000 of them are eligible for adoption. But these are older children, because what you said to me is it usually takes like till they're like age 12 before they're even eligible for adoption. Why? That's because what you said, that it's giving a lot of power to the parents. Is that right?
Well, it's giving a lot of power to the system. And so the parents, if they're not working, if they know how to kind of drag their feet just enough, that gets delayed for years and years and years and years. And if you're a parent, I mean, through the ranch I volunteer at, we have stories of kids where, you know, the mom, and again, like, I'm sure these moms love their kids, like, but they're not able to parent the children. And so they've been at the ranch for years, but the parent will know just enough of, like, you know, they're about to be served papers and they go in the hospital, so they can't be served papers, or they're homeless and so they can't be found, and so then they can't be served papers, which means then the kid is not eligible for adoption. So you're right.
So the parents don't want to place a child with an adoptive family.
Correct.
They want to be able to hold that control.
Correct.
But yet they don't want to be taking care of their children either.
That is true. Yeah.
And so this whole time, these children are waiting.
Yes. The children
either the parents to come back,
right,
or to then be adopted.
Correct. Yeah. So the children are the victims, 100%. And so, you know, yes. So basically, at least in the state of Florida, the average age of adoption through the foster care system is going to be 12. And there are not, like, it's funny when people will say to me, oh, it's so nice you adopted, you know, there's so many children that needed to be adopted. And I'm always like, where are they? I will take more. Like, where are these kids? Because
I mean, a lot of pro-life families that, I mean, like, people are like, you find a baby, you call me, right? You're calling me first. And I'm like, I don't, like, get calls from girls who say, I have a baby, I want to place with adoptive family. Like, that doesn't happen, right?
Right. And I wish it would. That's I wish it would.
Can you explain that? Can you explain because your third child,
Yes.
you were able to adopt as an infant. We talked about how
Yes.
that was kind of a miracle, but
Yes.
how many infant adoptions are there in the United States? Like, I guess explain for everybody else who doesn't know your story,
Mhm.
how rare it is.
Yes. So there's about, this number was actually bigger than I thought, but it's about 30,000 a year infant adoptions in the United States. So that's private, newborn, baby adoptions.
That's it?
That's it, which is actually more than I thought, because when I was going through the
Okay.
process, I thought there was like 5. I mean, not really, but so a large agency would do about 40 a year. So that is a lot. There's other agencies that do, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12 maybe is like a mid-sized agency.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it's
This
not a
explains
lot.
some of the cost then, why the cost is so prohibitive then.
Correct.
If the
Yes.
agency's only facilitating so many adoptions a year.
Right. Because when you're doing a newborn infant adoption, it is costly. And a big part of that has to do with advertising for the agency, the support of the agency, the social workers, the infrastructure basically of the agency. And so if they were doing more, you're right, the cost would be defrayed. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we often hear, I know my friend, Vice President Pence, he always, it's kind of part of his like stump speech when he's talking about life and protecting life. He always, makes a point about how the average cost of U.S. adoption, I think, is around $60,000.
That's not true. But yes, it is high.
So it's what is it really?
So it's probably about 40,000.
Okay, about 40,000.
Which is high.
He may say that. Maybe I don't know. In my sleep deprived state, maybe I added 20,000. So it's still a lot, though. I mean, that's still still a lot of money, but absolutely. That's not the full equation, though, because just lowering the cost of adoption isn't going to make it so that there's more children to adopt, because 30,000 children, infants eligible for adoption versus nearly 1 million abortions a year. I mean,
right.
And the last time I Googled it, I was on a campus and I was telling a group of students, I think there's about 1 million couples willing to adopt in the United States. And, the new like Gen Z term is cite your source. Like, the sky is blue, cite your source. And so they were shouting at me. So I was like, okay, let me go to Google. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, you're wrong. It's 2 million couples waiting to adopt. So, I mean, look at that number, that there's more couples waiting to adopt than there are children being aborted. It's unbelievable.
And there's so many couples like that would take probably more babies. So although I'm not trying to adopt right now, we have a 6-month-old and we are just beyond blessed. But if somebody said, gosh, there's these extra babies, we'd be like, well, bring them on. That's great.
Me too.
Is that right? Right.
But so the challenge is you have these older children, though, who are looking for adoptive families. Yes. And you and I were talking about that because so I've researched a lot into foster care, how we would become foster care parents, my husband and I, what we would need to do, how we could eventually adopt. And these profiles, was it USA Kids?
AdoptUSKids.org, I think.
And that's the children who are in foster care who are eligible for adoption. Most of these children are 17 years old.
Yes, or have really, really extensive medical needs, or are a sibling group of like 3 or more. Yes. So that's the thing. When people say all these children, like when you were saying on college campuses, all these kids in foster care need to be adopted. You know what? I would agree. They need to be adopted, but they are not eligible for adoption. It would be amazing if they became eligible for adoption, especially at young ages, because the truth of the matter is, the older the child, the more the trauma. That is just life in general. But you add foster care to the mix, and it is kind of ridiculous. So these poor children go in wounded, because if they wouldn't be in foster care if there were not some significant wounds, and then they just get re-victimized. Like, it is so gut-wrenching. And if we could intercede at a much younger age, if we could get those kids out of those placements and into adoptive homes at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, our society would be completely different. Because unfortunately, it's children in foster care that are filling our jails, that, that are not graduating high school. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. It is the system's fault. It is broken. And I don't know how to fix it, but I really wish we could. I feel like that's
yeah. I mean, that's what I want to talk to you about. I mean, it's think about the hurt people, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Or these children are hurt. They feel abandoned. They have to schlep all of their belongings, everything they own, from house to house in garbage bags.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, think about
it's inexcusable.
It's unbelievable the way we treat these children. They are forgotten, and then we wonder why they act out or they commit crimes. I know when I was reading about becoming a foster parent myself, they were saying that any child in the foster care system, even if the child is weeks old, months old, any child in the system is traumatized. That there is trauma, that it is not if they're traumatized, it is they are and how much. And that there is so much hurt. And as you're right, it's years go on. And if we're waiting for the parental rights to be, extinguished from a judge, it's sad to me to hear that there are parents who aren't taking care of their children, but yet it's almost like selfishness that they don't want to say, you know what, I can't take care of you. I'm in and out of drug rehabs. I'm living on the streets or whatever. But instead of allowing you to go onto a home that's going to love you and protect you, I'm just going to let you languish in foster care.
Yeah. Yeah. And the saddest thing is when the kids know it and the kids call out their parents and say, you're being selfish. Let me go. And they won't. And there's nothing.
That's happened when you've been.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's unbelievable. I know it's really gut wrenching. And so
You're
that's
not the easiest person to talk to, Jacqueline, because it's so hard, to hear. I don't know. I mean, I guess I deal with a hard subject every day too, of
you do.
The killing of children, but I guess, you can get immune to it, but then to hear it, I was like, oh my gosh.
That's why I think birth mothers are the most amazing people on the planet who place their babies for adoptions, because these are women who have said, I am not able to parent. And the truth of the matter is, it's kind of a similar population of foster care. Drug abuse is rampant in our country. And so it's rampant in foster care. It's rampant in private adoptions. Yeah, it's everywhere. So it's the same. So, I mean, I think if a lot of adoption cases are prompted by the birth mothers recognizing, if I test positive when I give birth to this baby, if this baby tests positive, the state's going to be involved anyway. So why don't I take the control back? Why don't I get to choose who raises my son or daughter instead of the state? And so they do. Now, others are not drug abusing and they make this decision much more just about the baby, about the life they want for that baby. But I think others recognize the state is going to take this child. I don't want that to happen. Maybe it's because I was raised in foster care and I know what that looks like. And so they take that control back and they give their kid a completely different life. And as an adoptive mom, I cannot thank them enough. I wish I could just hug my daughter's birth mother and just say, oh my God, thank you for my baby. She is the most incredible thing ever. My boys are also adopted. They are also incredible. They're not babies right now. They're teenagers, so they're not as cute. They're wonderful. They're going to listen to this.
Teenagers aren't as cute. I agree with that.
But they were adopted internationally. And so they were older. They were toddlers. And so it's not as easy to hug their birth parents. I don't know. We don't have any idea of where they might be.
Hey, Pearl Jen. You know as well as I do that the right to life is a fundamental truth in our nation. And in order to protect it, we need those willing to defend life in law by stepping into the political arena. Students for Life Action specializes in holding the political class accountable through grassroots initiatives in local, state, and even the federal government, and we're advocating for pro-life legislation at all levels. Join Students for Life Action's large nationwide network of volunteers and you can start making a tangible impact. We will teach you how to make a tangible impact in your community utilizing tried and true political strategies. You can sign up to host a pro-life political workshop, help educate and register voters or get voters to early vote and secure their vote, help close abortion facilities, lobby at your state capitol or Washington, D.C. There's so much you can do. I encourage you today, go to studentsforlifeaction.org and sign up, become a state captain, become a volunteer, get involved in the political arm of the pro-life movement. No, you're not a policy person. You're a psychologist, you're a writer, you're a mom, an advocate. And I know states are different because we talked about you're in Florida and state law in Florida, but like, what are some of the policy solutions you think that lawmakers and pro-life advocates, like when we go and speak about this issue at state houses, or we're speaking with, our state rep who might go to church with us or might live on our same street, like what are some like conversation things we need to start asking them of like, hey, what about this? Have you looked into this? Have you thought about this?
Mm-hmm. So often the judges' independency don't want to be there, because think about the job that they have every day. It's basically to take kids away from families, like in the family's mind. So that's a really awful job. So like when we finalized our adoption for our daughter, the judge was like, this is great. This is wonderful. I love when there's happy endings. I never get to see these because there's so few private adoptions. All they deal with in dependency typically is the foster care system, which is loaded with trauma on every end. And so having judges that are like invested and trained in dependency, who understand every minute of this kid's life is precious. This child needs to be with their permanent, loving, probably adoptive family as soon as possible. They have to get out of this system. They have to have permanency, because even if they're blessed to be with the foster parents that are eventually going to adopt them, which does often happen, even if that's the case, it is complete chaos for years while the system is going on. It is mandated visits. If parental rights haven't been terminated, it's mandated visits with people who may have abused you. But it's supervised, so they can't abuse you again. But like, that's traumatizing and weird. Like, how could I go be with my victimizer, even if they are your biological parent? So it's a lack of permanency, even if they're with the people who will eventually adopt them. So even if they're already in that home, they have no permanency. And these are smart kids. They know what's happening. These are street savvy kids that by, the age of 4 understand the system. So it's not like we're fooling them. They understand what's happening. And it is heartbreaking when the kid is calling out the parent and saying, like, just sign the paper or just stop lying to me. Like, I know you're lying to me. I know you're never coming back for me. Stop lying. I want to be adopted. Let me be adopted. And so I think in answer to your question, the step 1 would be really training of dependency court judges, helping them understand that every single second is absolutely precious. And so you cannot just do continuation after continuation after continuation. And you cannot push out court dates because somebody asks you to. Go back and say,
we have to talk to judges. We need to find out who our judges are in our, guess these are county judges or
these
state
are county
judges?
Yep. This is all by
these
county.
These are county judges.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then
that's a good action item. Find out who your county judges are, family judges are.
Yep. Dependency court, family court.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Family court. All right. Step 1. Step 2.
Step 2, I look at the legislation per state. And I think that the sooner we can get to, because what holds up what you have to have first is TPR, termination of parental rights. And so as long as that is delayed, then nobody can do anything. And so I think step 2 would be figuring out if there's kind of a hiccup in the system that is allowing like a loophole of, the judge, it's supposed to be done within X number of months, but the judge should always have leeway. I'm not saying take away leeway from the judges, but if it's, they're supposed to have gone to rehab. They're supposed to be employed. They're supposed to have permanent housing within 90 days. Well, if that happens on day 89, tough, like, or fine, but then we're not giving you an extra 90 days to do the next steps. You have to get all the steps done, or it would probably be more like, well, they got a job at day 89. Well, but they don't have permanent housing, and they don't, if they haven't really done it all, maybe don't give them so much leeway. And that sounds so harsh, right? Because the reality of that is you're saying to a parent, this is no longer your child. And no judge wants to do that. Like, that is really awful.
Yeah.
But it is about what is best for that child. And it is a permanent, stable, loving home as soon as possible.
Yeah. I think it's hard because even in this kind of conservative culture right now, we're talking a lot about parental rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
Parental rights matter when it's your choice for school, or the curriculum your children are learning, or whether or not your children have access to drugs that are going to make them infertile for the rest of their life because they're experiencing gender dysmorphia. But this is different. Like, we're letting these children suffer while, sadly, and it sounds like if you're in the system, you can kind of see it. There are parents who are just abusing the system.
Mm-hmm. Well, they know how to work the system. Yeah, they do. And so these are savvy people. I got to, I don't know if you're familiar with the community. It's called Community de Chinocula, which is, it's not a religious community. It's but it is essentially, it's a treatment place for addicts of whatever kind. But it is about prayer, work. And that's really it. Like, no therapy, it's really hardcore. It's hardcore manual labor, hardcore prayer, and you stay for a long time. But I was talking to some of these ladies because they happen to have houses right here. Next time you're down here, you should visit. They're amazing people, but they're like, well, we know how to work the system, so now we're using it for good. And I was like, that's awesome. Yes, you do know how to work the system. So they're savvy, right? Addicts are unbelievably savvy. And so they know, like, they know this judge, they know the system better than you and I will ever know the system, and they know how to work it. And so that's what they do. And nobody wants to take away a child from their parent. Nobody wants to do that. But the victim is the child. And like you said, hurt people hurt. And so that just perpetuates. And so if we could get children, if we could get that myth to happen of there's all these eligible children for adoption, that would change our world. That would change our world.
It absolutely would. What can we do? So beyond finding the judge, looking into state laws, I think we need to do a better job as pro-life advocates of, when we're talking to our legislators, starting to ask these questions of, have you looked into this? Have you been involved in this? This is what we've heard about the foster care system. To get especially pro-life lawmakers who obviously care about children thinking about this in a way maybe they haven't thought about before. What else can we do to help the kids? I saw a fundraiser the other day. I know my friend's organization was doing this for Christmas. They were like getting suitcases for the children in foster care in Atlanta, just so they wouldn't have to carry all of their belongings in garbage bags from house to house.
Yeah, and the suitcases might last a little while, or they might kind of just disappear. I think the best thing we can do is advocate for the kids. Because as long as they're in the system, like, so you could be a foster parent. So that's one thing that you could definitely do, and that anybody could do. Guardian ad litem, actually, that's the thing that everybody should be. Everybody should be a guardian ad litem, or in some states it's called a CASA, court-appointed special advocate, because these are the people who, if we have enough of them, are assigned, it's a volunteer position, they are assigned to walk hand in hand with the child. And so they advocate for the child. They are the only advocate that the child actually has, because the parents obviously are advocating for their thing, although you would hope that parents are advocating for their child. That's not what's happening in the system. So you've got the parents on one side, you've got the dependency workers or the DCF or CPS workers, social workers on the other side, potentially, but not necessarily doing anything. So
Hmm.
we are always in need of guardian ad litems, or again, the other word is CASA,
Yeah.
court appointed special advocates for children. And so what
And
they
anyone
do,
can sign up to do
anyone
that?
can sign up. You have to have a background clearance. Of course, there'll be a training. I did it in college. It was one of my first, like, I guess, like entry points into this world. And so I was actually getting my master's and volunteered, and it was great. And it's something that I plan to do kind of later in life when my kids are grown. But
Hmm.
you, it's wonderful. It's rewarding. It's amazing. And basically what you do is you'll be assigned a child in the foster care system, and you'll go visit them, and you'll make sure that they're doing okay. And then you'll show up to court dates. And then that's when you could advocate. And that's when you would say, Judge, this is not working. Why haven't we terminated parental rights? Or it might be the opposite. It might be, you know what, this mom is really working her butt off. Like, definitely don't terminate her rights. Like, let her keep trying. She's really working. Because you are sort of this person that's in between. So that would be an amazing thing. All of your college students can do that. All of your students who are like angry about the foster care system, if over 18, sign up. Go help a child in foster care. Go do that. Walk with them on their journey and help them get into their permanent loving home quicker.
That's awesome. I love that. That's something that we can actually do besides just
Mm-hmm.
donating or
Yes.
talking about it.
Yes.
Something we can do. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
I'm
And it's a
gonna have to
minimal
look into
amount of
that.
time, because you go that you have a certain amount of visits, but it's not the same as like a big brother or big sister. Like, you are a court appointed person. You are sort of like their guardian. And I remember in
Okay.
college, my parents were like, wait, you're going to be somebody's guardian? I was like, well, yeah. And they're like, no, I don't really think that's the right word. And I was like, well, because they knew legally what that meant. And I, at 20 something, was like, yeah, I'm a guardian.
What's your going back to the adoption
Yes.
system? What's your advice for a family who wants to adopt but doesn't know where to start?
Okay, so there are a million agencies. There are a million, not really. There's a lot of agencies. There's a lot of attorneys. There's also, we used a consulting agency. So we used a consultant to then tell us which agencies and attorneys were reputable, because unfortunately there's a lot of unreputable people out there. And so, that's kind of tricky. You can also do word of mouth. Of course, the consultant costs money. So it's just, but I will say, like, Catholic Charities in my area, you don't need to be Catholic, but they are the least expensive. And I have a godson from Catholic Charities, recently adopted. They are the least expensive adoption system agency that I've ever heard of. And what's really nice about the Catholic Charities, at least in our diocese or our area, is that they do something called caring choices. So they also, if a mom decides to parent, they 100% back her and support her and help her try to parent. So it's really just about, like, whatever that mom thinks is best for her child. If it's her, they're going to help her. If it's finding an adoptive family, they're going to help her find an adoptive family. But unfortunately, there are so many people wanting to adopt that we are a dime a dozen. So the agencies, the attorneys, are sort of like not that interested in us. They're really interested in the birth mother, because those are the ones that it is so hard to find. And so it's hard to adopt, which is why I said, when we were speaking, like, my daughter is an absolute miracle. The fact that she's with my family is unbelievably miraculous, because there are a lot of roadblocks always. But we had originally tried to get with this attorney, and he was like, no, I'm good. Like, I don't need any more clients, basically. And it was only because we knew a friend of his that we were able to, he would then talk to us. And he's wonderful. I mean, he's been doing it for 30 years, so he's very reputable. But basically, they have so many prospective adoptive parents that they don't need more of us. And some agencies won't even take any more on their waiting list, because they've just got hundreds. And others, if you want to specify, like, I want a boy or I want a girl, most agencies definitely will not take you. They basically want adoptive families that are open to the biggest range of everything possible. So. But that's why the
really
birth mother is in control.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, that's incredibly helpful. I want to end this with one kind of, I guess I thought as an adoptive mom yourself,
Hmm.
I guess if there's a girl watching who's pregnant and maybe considering adoption,
Hmm.
can you speak to her about why she should consider adoption?
Because it is the most beautiful gift you can ever give to your child and her parents, whoever those people might be. Because you will be like one of the most wonderful things that I learned going through this process recently is how much love the agencies and attorneys have for the birth mothers. And it's not just it ends when the baby's born. Like that is such a lie.
Mm.
Like the attorney that we have, I forget how long he officially provides counseling for, but he's like, but honestly, if they come back in 5 years, it's fine. I'll pay for counseling. I don't care. I was like, absolutely. That's what you should do. So, and other agencies have a support group for birth mothers, which these become like your friends. Obviously, they become your friends. They can help you walk through this process from the conception until 50 years from now. Like this is your support network. And so these agencies absolutely love these girls and women. As somebody who came from the field that kind of worked in a similar population, I'm very sensitive to how people speak about the girls that I love. And they love them just as much as I do, and it would be funny when they would sort of like, these are great girls. I know they're using drugs, but they're great girls. And I'm like, I know they're great girls. Of course they are. Like in women. And I should also say, it's not teenagers typically that are placing their babies for adoptions. It's women in their late 20s, early 30s, late 30s. So that's kind of a fallacy too, that these are like young 16-year-olds getting pregnant. That's really not the case. It's women who are later 20s all the way to 40 or probably later than 40. I mean, as long as we can have babies, they're going to be having babies. And often when they're older, they're more mature and they understand this is a lot of work. I'm not able to commit to this. It's also not always like, oh, this was my first child and it was unplanned, or this dad isn't involved. That's typically the case. But often it's a third child or a fourth child, and they're aware that they don't have the emotional capacity, the mental capacity, the just to raise this child in addition to their other kids, especially if those other kids might have special needs. They're very mature, they're very rational. Sometimes they are in like a long-term relationship with the birth father, and they both recognize like we don't want to raise children. We or maybe we've already raised children. Maybe our other kids are 15 and we're done with the baby. We don't want to redo this. And so there's lots of different situations and scenarios. And so I think if you're a woman, you found yourself in a pregnancy that's surprising to you, maybe don't rule out adoption. Like any of these situations might apply to you, and it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's also very different too than it was maybe 50 years ago, or 40 or 30 years ago, where it was like totally closed. You never had contact you never knew what happened to this baby. That is not the way this works anymore. So like my daughter's birth mother, if she chooses, like I send the information to the agency, and if she chooses to receive it, she absolutely can. Pictures, updates. We've offered contact. She's not ready for that. We 100% support and respect that. But if in the future, like she wants to meet with us, she absolutely can. So it's really about you, the birth mother, are totally in control of this situation, and you will be loved and supported throughout your pregnancy. And I think that's beautiful.
It is beautiful. Well, thank you, Jacqueline, for coming on today. I've loved hearing everything you had to share about adoption, about foster care, because this is something that I think is weighs heavily on every pro-lifer's heart, especially now in the post-Roe era, where we're really trying to figure out where are the gaps of service in the pro-life movement. What do we need to be, creating more of? And I know we're so honored at Students for Life. We have, every year a class of 200 fellows. These are the students that raise their hand and say, when I graduate, I'm thinking I want to spend the rest of my life serving in the pro-life movement. And I think sometimes we think like there's only like there's so many jobs in the pro-life movement. And I always try to get our fellows to expand their brains of look around in your community, what is missing? And I think this is a huge area where we should be able to send out all of these trained young people who are passionate and want to make a difference to end abortion into this field. We could fix this, guys. Like, this is actually very, very possible within a generation, because as we see, as anyone who's talking about abortion with hostile campuses or mixed crowds, this is something that, both left and right, pro-life and pro-choice agree is a problem. And so if we could get serious about this, we can make these corrections and spare these children years of being, pushed from one home to another and trauma, and help every child find a loving home. So, Jacqueline, just to close out, where can folks get your books? Because I know you use a lot of like your psychology work in the writing the book. So these are not like I can't. It's on my list. I already bought one of them, but I haven't read it yet. I'm a little busy. But where can folks get the books, and what are they about?
So this is the first book that I wrote. There's 8 books, and you can get it on Amazon. So The Light, it's on Amazon. Jacqueline Brown, I write under my actual name. I don't have a pen name. I do have a couple other series. But I think if you just look up Jacqueline Brown on Amazon, you'll find it. My website is jacqueline-brown.com. So you're welcome to look me up. And, if by chance you're somebody looking to try to place a baby for adoption, and you're like, I don't know an attorney to go to, I don't know an agency to go to, I'm happy to help. But I also think if you just Google it, you're going to find hundreds.
That's true. You guys reach out to me, and I can put you in touch with Jacqueline too. Thank you all for tuning in today. Thank you for listening to this important conversation. I really hope you'll share this podcast on social media, in your platforms, within your community, because this is too important of a topic not to be talking about in the pro-life movement. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.